hello guys. Today we're going to discuss on the essential technologies for a .NET developer. So Microsoft.NET is an ever-growing technology which is considered among the top three technology options for developing any enterprise application by the different companies. So because this technology also made an open source by Microsoft recently with .NET Core and the subsequent .NET versions, it has unveiled a new era of in the programming world. So most of the companies are now that's why moving to .NET Stack as a primary or secondary skill to deliver quality products. So before moving on to the topic in hand, proceeding with that, I would like to introduce myself. I am Ankita. I am a full stack developer and a team lead in having experience in .NET Stack and Azure Stack of development for enterprise applications. My total years of experience is of 9 years. I'm currently working with Microsoft and I started my career with Infosys, where I got trained in the .NET Stack of development. So before understanding what is going into crux of .NET development framework, let's understand what exactly a framework is. So the dictionary definition of a framework would be the basic structure underlying a system. So be it a house, be it a car, or be it a building. So the framework is the basic structure that is there. And on top of that, the various different features of the car or the house, they are built. But the common behaviors are basically there would be an engine, there would be some number of wheels for a car, right? So in terms of software programming framework, it is actually a tool that provides ready-made components or solutions that are customized in order to speed up development. So a framework can include support programs, compilers, code libraries, toolsets, and different APIs to develop software and create systems. Right now, we have many open source frameworks in the market, and they are always being updated and improved. And the new versions keep on coming for those frameworks. Any questions so far?
No.
I'll move on. So why would I use a framework in my software development? I can just write my own program. Why to use a framework? So the purpose of the framework is to assist in development, providing standard low-level functionalities so that the developers, like we can focus our efforts on developing the unique requirements in the project. So like there are certain things which cite certain very standard functionality which are required by all developers in a system. Like take an example of printing to a system. So printf, what we need to do for printf, if I go by the C# terms, what I do by the printf is like what I print is the unique feature that is given to me. So I have to print hello world. That hello world is a unique feature that another developer might not need to print the same thing. But printing to the console is the feature that is required by both developers. So that is provided by the framework. So this frameworks, they provide high quality pre-vetted functionality. So the use of that increases software reliability and speeds up programming time and simplifies testing also because they are already pre-vetted. So you don't need to go ahead and test it separately with your code development also. So ultimately, the frameworks are actually using the frameworks actually save time and money because in software terms, the cost is basically time. So what how will you choose which framework to use? There are many kinds of frameworks with some more popular than others. Like this Java framework, then .NET framework, Angular framework. So developers often tend to choose the framework that they are already most familiar with, but that might not be the always the right choice for the job. So instead of going with what you already know, the consideration should be put towards making a following the features of a good framework when deciding on the right framework for the project. And uh, for that, you should choose a framework which provides the functionality that is required for your project. So don't go by a framework which provides a lot of things which are not even ever going to be needed by your project. It should be a consistent framework because so that it can assist a large distributed team. There should be good documentation available for the framework so that and it should provide implementation training. And also frameworks are only as strong as the user base or support. So while choosing a framework, you should always go with a well established and with an active user base so that any problem you face, there are other people who have faced that problem before you who can provide support. So let's discuss about .NET now. We established what exactly a framework is and how do we, what are the good features of a framework. So what is .NET? .NET is a free cross-platform open source developer platform. It is used to build different types of applications. With .NET, you can use multiple languages, editors, libraries for web, mobile, desktop, games, IoT, and many more, even AI and ML. So, example of sites using .NET right now is like Microsoft Bing, then Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is built on top of MVC framework, which is provided by .NET, GoDaddy, etc. So, why would we choose .NET is because it is first of all it is free and open source, as like we discussed in the uh, start of this discussion, right? It provides cross platform support. Like it is supported in Windows, it is supported in uh, Mac OS, it is supported by Android and Linux as well. It provides this support for different types of processors like the 64-bit processor, the 32x86 ARM, ARM64. Uh, it also supports different types of programming language like C Sharp, F Sharp, VB, Visual Basic. Uh, and also you can develop a .NET application with using multiple types of IDEs like Visual Studio for Mac, Visual Studio Code, and without IDE also you can use the command line interface to develop a .NET application. Any questions so far? I'll move on if there are no questions. So let's understand a brief history of how .NET was evolved. It was not discovered. It is evolved by it was designed and developed by Microsoft around the 80s, and since then there have been many iteration and many evolution. Also, like we discussed, right? So any framework, they have an active community of developers which who keep on improving that framework. So .NET also has been improved over the time and it has evolved. So around 90s, it was developed by Microsoft and it is maintained by Microsoft till date actually. So around 2002, .NET Framework 1.0 was released. And right now, the latest .NET Framework version is 4.8.1. There was a new variance of .NET, which was .NET Core, was released in 2016, and current stable version of so .NET Core is the one which became uh, uh, platform independent. Before that, .NET framework was not so platform independent. Like it was not supporting multiple OS. Uh, so that's why the need of .NET Core was there. So current stable version for .NET is .NET 6. This is the continuation for the .NET Core, and latest version, which is released just a few months ago, which is called .NET 7.0. So let's look at an image. If you can see his timeline for different .NET versions, and I'm not sure if you're able to see this. So basically, this is a timeline from 1994 to 2022, and around when 2002, the .NET 1.0 framework 1.0 was introduced, which was compatible with the Visual Studio. So I'm not sure if you have heard about Visual Studio. It is an IDE. IDE means it is integrated development experience. Okay, so opening this Visual Studio, you can write your code, and that itself will provide you the functionality of running and compiling it. We'll get into details later. So with with .NET upgrades, they had to upgrade the Visual Studio also so that they can support the runtime of the .NET. So around 2016, .NET Core was introduced, which was compatible with Visual Studio 2016, I think. And right now, with Visual Studio 2022, .NET 6 is compatible. So let's understand what are the different implementations of .NET and what kind of application types they support. So like we discussed .NET Framework and .NET Core. So .NET Framework was the initial version, which was running till 2016, which was very much popular before .NET Core. So it used to support ASP.NET development. Basically, the whole website is developed on top of .NET Framework. It used to support Forms applications, ASP.NET applications, which is a website, and Windows applications as well, like WPF applications. So .NET Core, when it came, it supports more platform independence and more modularity. It supports web development, IoT application backend development, REST-based API apps. So currently, mostly the backend services and server end logic is REST API based logic is written in .NET Core. Moving to, let's talk about Mono and Xamarin also. So Xamarin is a new framework which is built on top of .NET. So which helps in mobile development, basically native Android, iOS, this kind of application development. UWP is Unified Windows Platform. So when Microsoft decided that for all types of devices, Microsoft devices, they can develop applications on top of UWP, like be it a Microsoft phone, Microsoft PC, or Xbox tablet. So Windows applications that can run on PCs, tablets, and Xbox are actually developed on UWP framework. So let's understand this particular .NET application structure. We'll talk about .NET Core application structure only, the current .NET Core and .NET versions like .NET 6. So it is built on top of the main core components of .NET applications are two things, like the runtime and base class libraries and .NET SDK. So runtime includes this just-in-time compiler and the garbage collection. So this garbage collection. So any object that is being created in memory, if it is not, when the program stops and when it is not being, or when it is not being used, garbage collectors collects and releases the memory. Uh, on top of that, there are base class libraries, which are basic uh, class libraries provided for by the .NET uh, .NET system. So to do basic operations, and like suppose there is this, we import certain code to do, like we were saying that the basic in the while discussing the framework, we were discussing that certain features which are standard and which are to be used by different, which can be used by multiple different, they're not unique to some projects, like finding max, math.max, or finding minimum of a number. These kind of class libraries are provided by the .NET system already. And so these are called class libraries. So already there are some predefined class libraries and functions provided by the .NET system. And then there are the compilers and .NET CLI. It is the command line interface. So you write a command in the CMD to run or build the application, or do what your give a command to the application. And then MS build is the build framework, which actually compiles the program. So the essentials to become a .NET developer would be to learn the prerequisites. So generally, most of the .NET application development that happens today are on top of C# language. The other ones, Visual Basic and F#, are not that common nowadays. C# itself is very strong. So right now, the version that is in place for C# is known as C# 10. So learning C# will be a prerequisite. Then some SQL fundamentals. So SQL is used to query databases. So because the .NET applications are basically mostly backend applications, so web REST API based applications. So what we do is we connect with entity framework, and entity framework, the it connects with the database. So you should know some SQL fundamentals to understand database queries, because even if you don't know, so C# and .NET provides link you to SQL as like code first approach as well. So where you might not need to write so many SQL commands, but understanding of how SQL works will help in writing the link you queries as well. Basic knowledge of HTML and JavaScript to develop front end of the applications that we develop. So uh, although this is for, so this requirement is for full stack development path basically, if you want to go into front end development as well. And then understanding uh, basic operations of Visual Studio, how to what is a solution structure in a Visual Studio, how to run and debug an application in Visual Studio, these things, or any IDE for that matter. Visual Studio is the most powerful IDE out there at this point of time for .NET development. So if not Visual Studio, then understanding the structure of Visual Studio code, or the .NET CLI, or the Visual Studio for Mac IDEs will be coming handy. Also, there are general development skills which you should have before getting into .NET development, like understanding of some certain algorithms and certain data structures, learning how to work with Git, or repositories so that you can work with share your code with other people and work with a distributed team. So for that, understanding of Git and GitHub a repository is very important. So for REST APIs, because we are talking about backend applications with .NET, understanding HTTP protocol methods like get, post, put, delete, these things will come handy. So if you're stuck anywhere, so don't be understand the power searching with Google. Don't be afraid to using Google, because what problem you're facing today might have been faced by somebody already. So don't be afraid to use search your problem statement. And then debugging and testing application. These are the general development skills which will come handy when you get into uh, becoming a .NET developer. Any questions so far? Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. So in the next slide, I'll demonstrate a chart for a path that you can take and the libraries that you want to learn to become a .NET Core developer. So let me open that. Let me know if you're seeing another screen. So these are the must-haves for. So this is a chart which demonstrates what are must-known items, good to know items, and interesting and other items. So there is a lot of learning opportunity for a .NET Core developer. So it's not just you learn something and you stop. There is a lot of growth opportunities in the .NET Core development process. So prerequisites, as we discussed, it is C#, which is a must-have. Learning basics of for 2022, when you become a .NET developer in 2022, you should learn the basics of C# 10, and then .NET 6, which is the current stable version. General development skills, which, as we discussed, the GitHub, GitLab, the HTTPS protocols, and learning how to search for solutions on Google. .NET CLI commands. If you are, this is an advanced thing. So if you are, the Visual Studio already takes care of all the commands which are to be executed on an application. So, but it is good to know what goes in the back end of those buttons you click on Visual Studio. What exactly Visual Studio runs? They actually run .NET CLI commands, and then the data structures and algorithms. SQL fundamentals we discussed. Then for the basics of ASP.NET Core are these framework. MVC means Model View Controller. This is a framework which segregates the control of responsibility between model, view, and controller. So model means, suppose there is an entity or any. So suppose I am trying to show a shopping cart or a sales team's dashboard. Okay. So suppose order management dashboard I am trying to see. So the order ID or the product, these things are models, they are entities. So what happens to the model and how it happens to the model and how I see the model in the UI, these three are defined by that. So model means the actual item in database, the controller means the business logic, and view means the presentation logic. It's how it is segregated in model viewer. So this is actually a development philosophy on how you can how it and this is a framework that provides the segregation between uh, different depend different responsibilities. REST is for APIs. So uh, for backend APIs, you should have understanding of what is REST. Razor pages like are basically they are built on top of HTML, and this is for the front end side. So views are generally uh, developed on Razor pages, the and Razor components. So middlewares are backend code logic, which can be used by a .NET core application. And these are again when you go into understanding .NET core basics and when you learn about it, you'll know understand what are filters, attributes, configuration, authentication and authorizations are ways to so any application you want to make it secure, there should not be any unauthorized or unauthenticated person who should be logging into an application. So logging in itself is a uh, way to provide authentication and authorization. So these are the next steps after you learn C sharp, SQL fundamentals, and uh, general development skills. So this is actually gives a uh, timeline of how you should learn dot, on the .NET applications. So I'll not go into deep in them. Uh, so solid principles are actually design principles. So for developers to understand low-level designing or philosophy of how they should write their code, these are in place. These are rules of how you should write your code. Entity framework core is again it is to connect with database and database models, persisting data in the in some database. The entity framework core is used. Dependency injection is also a best practice for coding. For that, dependency injection is in place. Caching. Next step would be to understand caching. So when database hits are very costly. So when we design an application, these are again not for beginner level. These are when you advance in your experience, when you move ahead to become lead in your system and you become an architect. That time you understand about how to design fast application. So for that, caching is important. So cache retrieval from a cache is much more fast than database. So you can understand about have learning about how caching works in .NET Framework. Then there are different types of databases. So SQL Server is a relational database, which is very much compatible with .NET Framework. And then there's Azure DB. There are other also because .NET Framework is .NET Core is very it is open and it supports cross platform, so it supports other types of database connections as well. But these are mainly what are used with .NET because of native support. SQL Server, Azure Cosmos DB, Redis for NoSQL. Then there is testing. So any code you write, any method you write should be unit tested, because it is developer's responsibility to make sure your code is working. And how do you ensure that? So instead of just going with manual testing, there are different types of testing, automated testing, which you can ensure, like unit testing, integration testing, and then behavior testing. So unit testing is a must-have. For that, XUnit, mocking, these MOQ, these frameworks are in place. So till now, MVC is a monolith application which we discussed. So moving after you understand about the previous topics, you can also dig deep into microservices and how deployments can happen in cloud. So basically, from .NET stack, you move to a cloud stack development. Different design patterns. These are again when you move advance into your in a direction of an architect role. You can understand about different design patterns. Any questions so far? So this is for continuous integration and delivery. So uh, in when you join a company, you'll see that whatever code you write your code in your local system, and you uh, push the changes after you write in a local system. How that code goes into a production server, like how other people are using that. That is by different pipelines. When you submit your code into a particular repository, with that code is built and run, and through different pipelines, they are deployed into different environments, and the last stage of environment would be a production environment, which other people can use. Any questions so far? So these would be the essential. The prerequisites we discussed. As a .NET developer, this is the paths you can take, and you can become. These will be the essential to become a .NET uh, successful in your as a .NET developer. Okay, so let's understand now what are the opportunities and what would be the salary ranges for .NET programmers. So as per Indeed.com, the in India, .NET developer salary average base salary is this 6.94. It starts from around 5 lakh, and it goes up to for starting people, new joiners. It starts from 5 to it goes up to I think 11, 12. Uh, but this is a data as published in the Indeed.com. So career opportunity there, because .NET is used in right now because with development of .NET Core and it being open source, and with .NET 6 uh, being very robust, the there are different types of opportunities which different types of applications which use .NET. So you can become a Windows application developer or a web developer with .NET Core web APIs, or a game web developer with .NET Core web APIs and Angular stack development in front, or maybe the Razor pages is the front end development, and a game developer, a cloud based application developer. This is a role I play actually. I develop enterprise applications which are which are deployed to the cloud, an IoT developer, and or a AI and ML developer. So the .NET also has capability of has a new type of framework called ML.NET. So that's how you can also go into ML, machine learning development. So uh, there are different opportunities, and different companies, like all, because most of the companies are it is among the top three development frameworks with Java, Angular, Java, Node, and .NET being another one. So there are a lot of companies who hire .NET developers, Microsoft being one of them as well. So uh, this that's all. There are, there's a lot of opportunities in that field. So that's all I had for today's talk. Thank you. So you can please visit the skillhouse.com to book your classes.